Hi, I am Ozan Kocadağlı from Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University at Department of Statistics. Today, I will present genetic Monte Carlo approach with recursive hyperparameters for Bayesian neural networks. The outline of this study as follows. First, I will talk about neural networks, Bayesian learning, Gaussian approximation for artificial neural networks, recursive hyperparameters approach, genetic algorithms, genetic Monte Carlo algorithm, and applications. Generally, Bayesian treatments of learning in the artificial neural networks are typically based on Gaussian approximation, ensemble learning, and macro-chain Monte Carlo. In this study, we are interested in a simple artificial neural network structure with one hidden layer. This structure simply includes one input layer, one hidden layer, and one output layer. In order to minimize errors between observations and estimations, researchers mostly use empirical risk, like a mean-squared error. Unfortunately, this approach causes two types errors, like approximation and estimation errors. The approximation error arises because the exact nonlinear behavior of the regression function is certain now, and consequently, true function has to be approximated by a combination of parameterized basis functions. The estimation error is the result of our lack of knowledge about the conditional distribution. Likelihood methods do not attempt to estimate this distribution, but instead minimize the empirical risk. In order to control approximation and estimation errors, one way, perhaps the simplest, of making use of a prior knowledge is to impose smoothness constraints on the model. This scheme is known as a regularization. It reduces the infinite number of possible solutions to the learning problem to one that balances the bias and variance error terms. The other approaches for controlling the complexity: early stopping, training with noise, mixtures of networks, growing and training techniques, and information criteria. To control approximation and estimation errors, today I will introduce Bayesian learning. The simple way for Bayesian learning is Gaussian approximation. According to this approximation, the uncertainty in the parameter space is assigned the probability distribution, presenting the degree of belief in the different values of parameter vector. By maximizing the posterior distribution over the parameters, the most probable ones can be determined. The probability of a data value given the parameter vector is constructed as follows. Provided data points are drawn independently from equation first, so the likelihood can be constituted for n observations as follows, like a equation second. More generally, the likelihood function can be written as in equation third. Using the rules of probability, the distribution of outputs for a given new input vector is given by as following equation. In order to evaluate the distribution of outputs, Gaussian approximation for posterior distribution of parameters can be used. In literature, two approaches are discussed to treatment of hyperparameters. The first, analytic integral approach, and the evidence approximation. In the study, in order to estimate hyperparameters, the first approximation is preferred. This can be done by the following marginal integral. To evaluate the above integral, the specific choices for priors are determined. If improper uniform priors with logarithmic scale form are preferred, then priors can be given by as follows. This choice leads to straightforward analytic integrals over the hyperparameters. The integral over alpha can be evaluated as follows. The integration over beta can be performed in exactly the same way with result. According to analytic process, efficient beta and alpha hyperparameters calculated as follows. In the slide, the last equation corresponds to error function, including efficient beta and efficient alpha hyperparameters. This error calculated from directly posterior distribution. In order to train artificial neural networks, we can use different types of training algorithms, like gradient-based and evaluation algorithms. For instance, genetic algorithms directed search methodology based on the mechanics and biological evaluation developed by John Holland to understand the adaptive process of natural systems, to design artificial system software that retains the robustness of natural systems. In literature, there are different types of genetic algorithm procedures, but simply genetic algorithm cycle includes L-parents, crossover, mutation, and emergation operators. In the study to train Bayesian neural networks, we produce genetic Monte Carlo approach. This approach converting all the parameters of energy functions to binary numbers, or real ones. Secondly, apply genetic algorithms procedure to minimize energy function. Finding the best solution of energy function, this methodology considers recursive hyperparameter approach. The last step, comparing to candidate and previous parameter vectors constituted from previous iterations by Metapoulos-Hastings. The Metapoulos-Hastings procedure can be constructed as follows. In the applications to compare different training algorithms and our proposed approaches, we used a benchmark dataset. This dataset sees following figures. Firstly, we separate our data like a training and test datasets. For instance, in our first analysis, we used gradient descent with momentum algorithms to train artificial neural networks with mean squared error. To improve performance of artificial neural networks model, we consider different of number of neurons in the hidden layer, learning rate, momentum constant. Then we calculate different mean square errors, test mean square errors, and training and test correlations from artificial neural networks. Can be shown as follows. In the second application, we consider Gaussian approach with fixed hyperparameter. To train Bayesian networks, we used Quasi-Newton training algorithm. To improve performance of neural networks models, we considered different combination of hyperparameters. In addition to, we consider different number of neurons in the hidden layer. You can see different performance of artificial neural networks frameworks in the table. In the slide, you can see performance of Bayesian neural networks with respect to different combination of hyperparameters. In the third application, we applied genetic Monte Carlo approach to Bayesian neural networks with fixed hyperparameters. To improve performance of training algorithms, we considered different generation, mutation, and algorithm operators, in addition to different number of neurons in the hidden layer. You can see performance of frameworks in the table. In the last application, we consider the performance of genetic Monte Carlo with the recursive hyperparameters. In this procedure, all the hyperparameters are renewed in different iterations. So, our procedures bring out efficient hyperparameters for Gaussian approximation. Similarly to other applications, we used different operators for genetic algorithms. You can see performance of models in the table. From analysis results, we can see that our procedures provide best performance of artificial neural networks in the context of Bayesian learning. Comparing to genetic Monte Carlo with recursive and fixed hyperparameters procedures, actually recursive ones bring out very flexible structure because in all the iterations our hyperparameters renewed automatically. But in the fixed hyperparameters approach, the researchers need to try different combination of hyperparameters. But this excessive time consumption. Consequently, it can be said that Bayesian regression is superior to traditional neural network with mean-squared errors trained by gradient-based algorithms. Occam's razor actually is embodied automatically and competitively in this approach without penalty function, since complex models self-penalizing in the Bayes rule. The determining hyperparameters alpha and beta automatically in each iteration facilitates to find optimal value of objective function. Genetic algorithms are adapted to Bayesian neural networks and that ensures better results. Especially at the problems with high dimensions, genetic algorithms work more better than the other search algorithms. Thank you so much for your interest.